Hi, I'm Krzysztof Trojnar. I'm a DOP on first four episodes of Baby Reindeer, and this is Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we're speaking with Krzysztof Trojnar, the cinematographer of Baby Reindeer. Krzysztof, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
What a whirlwind this past year has been for you with the success of Baby Reindeer. I mean, it must have just been insane.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely didn't expect that level of following, that level of that size of the audience. Like that is definitely beyond our imagination or expectations. I mean, we were. I remember when we were shooting the show, like we had conversations of maybe this show being once or twice presented in some kind of local TV series festival, or we were kind of hoping it will find its audience. I mean, we knew the script was good, and like it definitely everybody like was really responding really well to the script, and I feel like there has been an atmosphere of looking out for it in the circles of like among producers, and I've heard some from people who are involved in TV development that it was a good script, but yeah, we didn't.
That doesn't mean
expect
anything.
it
It's like how many good scripts don't get made, or if
Yeah.
they do get made, no one cares. Like
Yeah.
you guys got lightning in a bottle with this, and for good
Yeah.
reason. I mean, well
Yeah.
acted, great script. It looks amazing, and you were responsible, as far as I understand, for the first 4 episodes, right?
Yeah. So we set it up with the director. We were the first ones shooting. We did the block one, what it's called. It was episode 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when we wrapped, the second crew came in and continued block two. But yeah, we had the pleasure of setting it all up and plotting it out, what it's gonna feel like and what it's gonna look like. So yeah, it was incredible experience, and I'm glad it paid off. Um, I'm glad it paid off, and I think with there's so many there's always so many ways it can not go exactly how you wanted it to go, and I think we were actually really lucky and fortunate that all the elements worked for it, and I think everyone worked really really hard, and it was definitely a sort of blood, sweat, and tears experience where everyone put 100% into it, and but it paid off, and that's what matters.
That's an interesting thing you just said there about how there's so many ways that it can fall apart. There's so many ways that it could not work.
Yeah.
Do you kind of feel that? Like when you're on a project, you don't need to name names, but when you're on a project and you start feeling like the wheels go off, you start thinking like, oh no, this is falling apart. Like, do you have an instinctual feeling as you're filming something that it may not actually come together as planned?
I definitely had experiences in the past, maybe not so much with narrative work, but also no, sometimes actually as well. And I think you start to see like sometimes you suddenly hear or see that someone is questioning certain choices, and the choices that were there for a while, and then there may be different people in different roles can have different point of view, but yeah, sometimes you feel it
How do you deal with that?
um well hopefully by explaining the vision, and like hopefully by conversation can get resolved. If it comes from the right place, people people get convinced with it. But yeah, there's always the hope.
I love that.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know, like with especially with like commercial projects. In for example, I also shoot advertising sometimes,
I've seen
and
a lot of your ad work because that's
yeah,
what I do. I direct and produce commercials. So I'm always
right,
interested in what our
yeah.
guests do in commercial work. And your work is so good.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, there is always that feeling of, there's creativity, but there's also some expectations, and you can sense quite often and see how something that was a great treatment or a script suddenly like falls apart. Yeah, that does happen.
Oh yeah. Well, because there's so many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, I've never been on a show. I've never worked on a show like really anything long form, but there are so many cooks in the kitchen with advertising, and the roles are a little bit different in advertising, especially as a
Yeah,
commercial director. It's
for
your
sure.
vision, but you're working so closely with the creative director at the agency that you almost the lines are blurred. You know.
No, 100%. I mean, I think on television show also, there is a group of people involved in, creating the show. There's director, but also there are executives, and there is a showrunner. And all those people have to communicate and find the vision, and I can imagine it must be very difficult to have a singular vision in a situation where there's few creative people involved trying to do one thing. And yeah, I'm so glad that in case of Baby Reindeer, I think there was a single vision, and I think everyone sort of was on the same page.
Well, let's talk about that vision. I want to discuss with you the visual approach to Baby Reindeer. When I watch it, what I feel is claustrophobic. I feel constantly like the world is coming down on our main character. I feel
Yeah.
claustrophobic when I'm watching it. It's uncomfortable to watch in a great way. But that's the word that comes to mind if I had to sum the look of Baby Reindeer into one word. Claustrophobic is the word for me. Curious if you agree, and just your general thoughts on creating the look of the show.
Yeah, no, I think I'm so glad you say it, because I think the first words that um, we were using during like my interview for the show, or my initial conversations with Veronica, were definitely the character being stuck, being oppressed in through his essentially place where he is in the world, and that kind of sense of intensity and stuckness and oppression in the sense of environment and the world oppressing, pressing down on the character, or Martha sort of intruding the space and intruding his life, and kind of also uh, uh, pressing Donnie in his life in a way. So that definitely was a sense of claustrophobia and kind of spatial stuckness and oppression, in terms of just to portray the state of the character, for sure, for sure. And I think the other thing, for example, that's maybe a bit more detailed, but when we were talking about how we're going to portray even city, although it doesn't really appear that much in the show, how we wanted to show it in a way that you're never seeing too much sky. You never, it's all kind of built around Donny. There is no sense of comfort or space apart from one scene when he's in Edinburgh, and it's a flashback where everything feels a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more hopeful. There is sky, there is more perspective, although it quickly turns into something else. But that's, yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't notice about the lack of sky, and that's a really interesting technique that I just didn't notice, but contributed certainly to the feel of the show. So that's cool. When you get direction like that from your showrunner, from your directors, I want this to feel claustrophobic. I want this to feel tight. I want to feel like the world is coming down on him. How do you translate that into cinematography?
I think in this case it was about creating creating the closeness of a feeling that you're constantly close to the character. So we knew it's going to be wide lenses. We knew it's going to be camera really close in on characters, always sort of almost like attached to Donnie. The choice of eye line and how close it is to camera, how you get that sense of almost characters looking at Donnie. And if you think about it, it's his life is presenting himself on the stage and looking for attention. So if you would look at the sort of first references, we were thinking of those kind of compositions where characters almost look into the camera. And you get that sense because Donnie is on the stage. Everyone is looking at him. That's his dream. But at the same time, Martha is looking at him and Martha is really close and this is becoming oppressive. So it was all about actors looking almost straight to the lens. We would have markings on matte box, literally putting them as close to the lens, to the glass as possible. Sometimes, Richard not seeing Jess directly, but just standing there and Jess looking into a mark on the matte box rather than looking at Richard. Never putting camera. It's so easy, and you're going on a tight schedule and, you need to get the shot of, let's say you do a reverse shot on the actor and it's so easy just to put a camera a little bit further away, putting a longer lens, shooting it from the side of the actor, and maybe not necessarily over the shoulder, but shooting it from a comfortable camera position. Whereas we paid a lot of attention and pushed really hard to always get that camera further in with, if it means moving something out of the way, moving bar out of the way, we would do it to create that kind of intense experience and intense effect on screen. And I think sometimes, there was pressure and it wouldn't be the most obvious choice, but it somehow works on the screen. And I hope now everyone sees that in a way. That, yeah, definitely. I'm sure there were moments where people were looking at us and thinking why we're pushing for certain things, if you know what I mean.
Yes. Was there?
I'm sure you've experienced that as a filmmaker.
Oh, definitely.
In the past.
And I love stories like that because that's the real stuff. Was there a shot that you really had to fight for that everybody kind of second guessed?
They were some non-obvious shots that we had to fight for. I remember, and that was sort of end of schedule, and everyone knew each other pretty well at that point, but sort of shooting insets of some things, of the coke being poured. And it was so important that we see it from the top. We see it from Donnie's perspective, as you would, looking down on the counter, you would see it as a top shot. And I remember maybe George, the first AD, kind of losing his patience, not losing his patience, but just, wanting to move the train forward, and us shouting that this is really important that it gets established that way. And it's one of the first shots of the film, and we really need to pay attention to it. But obviously, you could just plonk the camera and shoot it really fast without doing the whole re-rigging to achieve the top shot. It would look like a top shot, but it wouldn't be a top shot, but you would feel the difference on the screen. Yeah, there's some a little bit of insight to our process on set, which, yeah.
Let's talk about episode 4 of Baby Reindeer. This episode to me, now I knew nothing about the show when I first watched it.
Right.
So I knew it was going to take a very dark turn. But I thought the dark turn was going to be between Martha and Donnie.
Yeah.
But as we all see in episode 4, that the darkest of turns happened prior to that.
Yeah.
And this episode has a warning at the beginning of it. It's very violent. There's scenes of grooming, there's a rape, there's drug abuse in it and drug experiences in it. It is a wild episode and certainly worthy of all the accolades that it's getting. But I want to talk to you about this episode specifically. When you first got the script, when you knew you were going to be working on this one, what were your initial thoughts and how did you prepare?
It's a good question because I can't exactly remember when I read it, because when I interviewed for the show, I was only given the first episode. I got a hint. They explained to me what's going on later on in the show, but during the process of me of me talking about it at the first in the early days, I didn't actually read. I didn't get to. I only got to read the first episode. So I read it a little bit later on in the prep, and I think at that point we knew it's gonna get heavy and it's almost I remember Veronica talking about it, that at some point it becomes a horror, and like that's where it all should be going in terms of the darkness and how we'll feel. And I guess the other thing was that we discussed that the camera should never, the perspective should never change. So like we are in the show from the beginning, it's a first person point of view show. It's story, it's Donnie's story, and we're always close with him, and that doesn't change throughout it, despite the horror and horrible things that happen in it. So I guess that was the one of the talking points throughout the prep, and yeah, and then I guess when I was reading it, I remember it, however it might sound a little bit abstract, but I remember when I was reading it, I was thinking about those traumatic moments, and there was definitely like an idea of, I would imagine a state where the consciousness could elevate yourself, like you could literally think of yourself as an object on the floor and kind of see it from above in a way, or see it from far away, that it's so hard and heavy that at some point the point of view changes into this kind of distant view. And I think we try to explore that with Veronica, where when he's high, the camera is like flying above him and kind of showing him in a different perspective, or when the when he's in the corridor, suddenly this corridor gets so long and you're kind of feeling lost when he takes LSD, and there was this definitely feeling of like we wanted it to feel, most of it to be really close in and with Donnie and experiencing, but also sometimes almost leaving and then kind of stepping back, and yeah, and feeling that kind of almost a feeling of like the camera leaving the character in a way, and elevating itself.
There is something there's an interesting trick that you use in episode 4 of Baby Reindeer with the idea of a spotlight and the idea of Donnie getting the attention that he so craves.
Yeah.
Even though it leads him down the worst paths possible and horrible decisions, horrible choices, he so desperately wants his art to be recognized. And I'd love to hear from you the strategy behind that, how that came to be, and how you see the use of these spotlights in your cinematography from that episode.
Yeah, no, it's definitely was the theme of Spotlight was discussed, but also it's a reoccurring theme that Donnie talks about in Baby Reindeer in his story, and yes, starting from a completely practical use of it in the comedy shows, which was actually interesting because I think Richard at the beginning was a little bit opposed of Spotlight, using the Spotlight in comedy shows, because he said it was unrealistic. Like, you wouldn't, in a small London comedy show, there wouldn't be a space for Spotlight, because it's just not, those places don't even have them in stock, if you know what I mean. But I think for us it was like a story feature, that it was a story element that like felt completely justified, and felt like that's what Donnie needs visually to that's kind of what he's looking for, and he, puts him on the spot, like in that first scene in episode 1, where you almost don't see anything. There's a total black abyss and the spotlight, and that's a very uncomfortable feeling. And he only just hears slurs from coming from sort of a dark image, but you don't know really. You can't portray those people. I think I quite love that scene, actually, in a way. And then obviously going to episode 4, when spotlight suddenly starts to mean to mean something else. And also, when he starts to get drugged up, suddenly, I think he says, when I find myself in the spotlight of it all, and then this street light becomes one of it, but obviously has a bit of a different meaning, and suddenly turns this house into something else, and that space into something else, and even the look of Donnie starts to look different in a way when the camera gets really close and you see that face lit, and it starts to get this a very unusual, almost like sort of deconstructed way, in a sort of more deconstructed expressionistic way. But yeah, we actually practically changed the lighting setup at that point. So what was the street light wash suddenly became this. We used this lamp called Mole Richardson mole beam. We call them mole beams here in London, and yeah, I'm really pleased with that effect. And actually, we've worked with production designer, and we did a little previews where we figure out the size of the window and how it's going to work with relationship to the sofa and the distance in the studio where the light has to go. That was really useful, actually, because Debbie, the production designer, Debbie Burton, had to design the space in a way, having that in mind, because we were talking about it early on in the prep.
Yeah, how often do you get to do really elaborate previses for your scenes? It seems like that's a luxury for a lot of cinematographers.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was probably the only scene we've done any sort of 3D simulation. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you almost wish you could do it more often, or have the time to prepare it. Yeah, that was definitely a great thing to do because we had the 3D person in our department doing a 3D previs for production design. So we used their tools. So it wasn't like very sophisticated method, but we used their tool to simulate it, and it worked well. Yeah.
Episode 4 also has quite a few scenes with Donnie experiencing, all sorts of drug abuse, and he's high all the time, and there's a lot going on visually. There are countless movies and TV shows that depict drug use. How do you approach it differently?
Um, I think there were a few things we discussed. One, never being over the top with the depiction of high or drug use, in the sense that we didn't want to first, like, the story take away from Donnie and his experience and his sort of this kind of leading to pretty horrible things, and we didn't want to fantasize too much or create overly fantasized image of drug taking. We actually wanted that to be gritty and in a way unpleasant, or giving a hint of that it's not going anywhere. It's not the consequences are pretty terrible. So I think there was always that of not never going too wild with it visually, or too too effectsy, in a way that you should always feel like it's an experience grounded in reality. And the other thing was how we make it into a storytelling device. So when Donnie's talking about his experiences in Darian's flat, there's like there's a rhythm to it, and there is a visual story behind his voice narrative. And we were looking, we wanted to do a sort of a continuous visual story of how he went through all the possible drugs, and that was, we knew we wanted to do whip pans of where it feels like a continuity, and sort of an endless experience, in a way that leads to this horrible feeling at the end. And I don't know if I'm answering fully your question, but I guess then we discussed that at the end it becomes, when there's the Darian scene when they taking LSD, then it becomes something else, and that's the sort of the what's the word? It's the pinnacle experience, and it's the where, where it all, it builds up to a point of not being able to take it anymore. And for that sequence, actually, we asked Debbie, production designer, whether the corridor that he's running to the door that ends with with door he cannot open, what it actually is on set. It's we doubled the size of that corridor, so it's double the length. So originally the set was about, I don't know, would say about 20 foot, 18, 20-foot long corridor. Suddenly it just became a 40-foot long corridor. I don't think everyone sees it that way, but there is a hint of it, of this kind of like endless narrow corridor that you feel when we put a really long, really wide lens. And we've actually put the camera on his head using this POV rig, and when he runs through it, it has definitely, is enhanced to this kind of entrapped, claustrophobic feeling. Yeah, if that makes sense, what I'm saying.
It does, and it's such a great choice. I love it. Let's talk about the camera package. What did you use for your camera, and what were your lens choices?
So we used Alexa Mini LF. That was probably, to me, that felt like an obvious choice. We didn't want to use other large format cameras. I feel like for Alexa that there was this still feeling. I have a sense that some other large format cameras have a very realistic, almost hyper realistic feel to them. Whereas with Mini LF, it still felt that there's a bit of softness to that sensor. There is, there's I just like that camera at the time for what it was doing, and and then there were lenses that it was the ARRI DNA LFs. So the DNA lenses designed for LF sensor, and they have this amazing quality of falling, the resolution falling off to the edges of the frame, and the whole show being like the central compositions with Donnie, it just worked perfect for it. So that's why we use the DNAs. And yes, and then on few occasions we used a very like on one occasion actually of the LSD high, we used this custom ARRI rental in London lens where it has an even more loss of resolution um, in on the edges, and once we used a boroscope lens, like an Optex. It was called Optex. It's called Optex Excellence, where we installed the lens into a shower head in the scene when he goes to the bathroom after the rape. Yeah,
What about filters? Did you use any filtration?
no
Right.
filters,
So clean.
no
Everything
filters.
was done in post.
Yeah, yeah. I also didn't like the idea of like I love those lenses so much that I just didn't think it needed anything else, if you know what I mean. Like it was, everything else was done in grade. We didn't do any particular resolution changes, I don't think so, or any sharpening. No, I think it was just pretty much clean lens, and then just the grade. Yeah.
I want to step away from Baby Reindeer for my last question with you. I'm just curious. There's so much talk about AI in filmmaking now.
Mm.
And just curious if there were any AI tools that you've used or your just kind of general thoughts on the direction of it in filmmaking.
Oh yeah, I mean it's that's just the Pandora's box question in a way. Like
Does it
because
scare you?
yeah, I'm wondering like where is it gonna go, because I think as a as a VFX tool, it is just incredible if you think of how it can help VFX, how it can help the sort of the rendering. Like I imagine that it will just ease the process so much and make it more, you'll be able to do things that would normally take 2 3 weeks for a team of 3D artists to then, or CGI artists to then, you'll be able to achieve that faster and probably to better, even more photorealistic effect. But as soon as suddenly human beings will get replaced by a machine, I'm worried that this hopefully won't work, or people will quickly see that they kind of need the authenticity of a real human being and experiencing human being behavior, and I hope that will still stay. But yeah, we didn't use any AI tools on Baby Reindeer. I think it was too early because we were shooting like 2 years ago. But yeah, I think if used, like I hope it will be a tool rather than an entity that will replace and shorthand. That it won't become like a sort of easy shorthand in and I think that kind of danger we're sort of we hope that it will be just it won't be a shorthand to humanity, if you know what I mean. Like we hope in every aspect of life, and I hope it will same stay like that in film. But I feel like to kind of tell genuinely truthful stories that we will engage with. I don't know if a machine can make it fully convincing, and I hope not. Yeah.
Well said, and I couldn't agree more. Although I'm
Yeah.
interested by the tools, I'm scared of them a little bit, but
Yeah.
I hope that everyone will just sort of be able to use them as a jumping off point and not a
Yeah.
replacement. I guess we'll see. It's amazing
Yeah.
the
I guess we'll
advances we've
see.
made in 2 years. It's only going to get
Yeah.
crazier.
Yeah, for sure. We
Well,
might need to find a different occupation at some point. Well, you have the podcast, so yeah.
Well,
So yeah. Hopefully,
thank
you
you.
won't be talking to machines in the future.
Well, you might be able to upload your likeness and do all your interviews without having to do any
Yeah,
of your interviews.
yeah. And just stay
So
on holiday.
there are benefits. Krzysztof Trojnar, thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show. Of course, the show we're talking about is called Baby Reindeer. You know all about it. It's on Netflix. The entire series is there. And don't forget to check out gocreativeshow.com for this episode and all previous episodes. Of course, follow us on social too. Krzysztof, thank you for being on. Your work is incredible, and we are so honored to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you for having me here.